And
we're going to sharing. Mike's not here today. He's working with Laura Anchor on rare bees in the Chicago area, I presume. So gonna go to screen. Now I'm sharing. You see Mike's guide here. We pretty much finished, I believe, Chelostoma, but we didn't have a Chelostoma campanularum to show. And I found one in an old Smithsonian collection, not that we happen to have from Suzanne Batra. And so I've got that online here. If you want to look here, what it's talking about, it's a male. First, I'll note that it's super tiny. It's tinier than Philadelphi. And when you see it on screen, you'll see a pin in the background. That's actually the minutum, just to give you scale, rather than the main pin. And we'll first look at, it's pretty identifiable, so just the small size alone should be an alert. The second is that T7 has two very, very long, extended projections, almost prongs, and no others. So it doesn't have four projecting things like the other two do. So let's just switch to the scope here. And there it is. So you can see here, there's simply two prongs. Actually, there's the pin, there's the minutum. It's a really small bee. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Shouldn't change really the fact that you see really obvious two big prongs and then no side projections like you would in the other two species, with Philadelphia being closest to size, but having very clear four equal bumps, and rapunculi, I believe it would be, I may be pronouncing it wrong, being much larger than both of them and having two prominent and two smaller prongs. We flip to Discover Life to see how that is illustrated. If I can find the right place, here's Panurginus, here's Chelostoma. We look at this, you see for whatever reason, we don't have a picture or drawing of that one, but these other two have four bumps here with Philadelphia, and then we have this very odd looking rear end, which we saw with the other species. And I don't have good pictures of those. Okay, so we'll flip now to Panurginus, and I'm going to bring up some pictures here because that's useful. In addition to, I have all the species, I think males and females of each. So Panurginus is in that clade of things like Perdita, Pseudopanurgus, or the Pseudopanurgus has now been subsumed by Protandrina. It's gone all over the place in its taxonomic history. And then Panurginus. And then over in Europe, confusingly, they have Panurgus, which we do not have. So if we go, I don't believe we have. So if I go to our photo stream, we can take a look here. So these are relatively straightforward species if you get a vibe on. So it's worth looking at a set of pictures, including ours and others. But in a very easy to find technical way, often you end up, is that Pseudopanurgus or is that Panurginus? So first of all, in general, Panurginus is a spring bee, and in general, Pseudopanurgus is a fall bee, but there are some Pseudopanurgus species that linger in the spring. And the way to tell them apart is by looking at the wing structure, as would telling them from sorry, I'm doing two things here, telling them from Perdita. They're all small or small-ish and can range in size. I'm hoping that this, yeah, so here's the wings are, we'll look at it, maybe another wing here. But so the males are black with yellow clypeus markings, sometimes full, sometimes partial like this, which is nice. And
which one is that on deck?
I want to say this is potentillae.
Okay,
or
thank you.
tia, I suppose is potentilla. And so what you're looking for is they all have only 2 submarginal cells. The true Prodandrina has 3, but the Pseudopanurginus and Panurginus have 2. And in Panurginus, the vein, I'm struggling because I'm trying to think of the name. I always forget. The vein below it, cross vein, comes up and meets at the boundary between the 2 cells. Whereas in Pseudopanurgus, that vein there is going to run into the cell here in the middle. So it's a pretty straightforward one. Let's see, we'll go back. Let's see if we can see. I have another. We have 17 shots of Panurginus here. And let's see if we can find another wingy shot that is got a good look. So there is a vibe to this. Here's another wing. I don't know how well it's going to show. It's a little, so just a little cocktail party thing, which is all this color here, that's often species specific. It's not used in the guides, but if you're struggling, then what you're going to see is that these color patterns, which are called whips or wing interference patterns, can be helpful. I have not made any particular study of this, but it is published now and used more in wasps, but also in the wing structure of Xylocopa. So this doesn't
For all
really,
bees then, or just a certain family?
well, a lot of bees don't have whips. So it's generally the ones that do are it's wing interference between 2 layers of wing membrane, I guess. And it tends to be small things like Hylaeus, Panurginus, Pseudopanurgus, sometimes Perdita, and sometimes Dialictus even. But I don't know that anyone's actually made a study. This is something for people to do on that. So I'm not seeing a great picture here of the wing venation. You can go back to the genera guide to see those, but you can see this kind of shape and vibe to these small species. So they're all less than a grain of rice in size. And we're going to look at the Clypeus in detail, this area here, and at the architecture of the face for the females. Okay, so let's jump to the guide. So Mike does not have a Panurginus guide, and we do. Always room for improvement.
Gene reminded us that it's the first recurrent vein, aka 1M-CU.
Thank you, Gene. Yes, it does have a name, and often I just know it by looks, not by names. Okay, so here's the guide, split into males and females all in one guide, and the distribution is not completely throughout all the states, and I believe we add a couple more if we were to go further to the west in the Midwest, like Beardsley, if we were to include Mike's species of west of the Mississippi. Okay, so when we're looking here, you saw already in that one that we saw that the Clypeus was, in that case, the yellow was not completely filling the Clypeus. And so if you see a male and you know it's a Panurginus, and we should have clicked the male here, and this may be an indication of not working. Oh, maybe it was atramontensis rather than potentilla, or I was just looking at the picture wrong. So I want to go now to atramontensis. I'm just a little bit gun shy here because of the problems over the past couple days of Discover Life not loading, like I'm not getting the species page up. So, and this makes sense that it would be atramontensis, and I think my memory serves me right that it is. Now we're jumping to the species page for atramontensis, but you can, if you looked at that flash on that screen, you would have seen that potentilla, and I'm going to just bring up the specimen here that we have and demonstrate this directly. So atramontensis is an interesting species in the fact that it is a species that is an oligoleg or a specialist on not just a genus. Here's one, and it does have just half of a, look, there it is coming up finally, half of a yellow, or in whitish, really partial to that. So let me bring it up on deck, show that. We take off the Chelostoma that has arrived here. Need to put this someplace I don't forget it. There we go. And now we're putting in the atramontensis. And this face that they have is also, it just presents in a way, take this down, that is, I can't explain it, but it's like, oh, that is a Panurginus face. This is just like birding, where sometimes you have a bird, you see it, and you go, oh, obviously that's this, but you can't put your finger, you can't articulate what the identification string was. So we got some shine on here. I'm gonna take my lighting up a little bit so that it goes through some vellum paper. There we go. By the way, if you are ever using the little IKEA type lights for your identification, which we do, what really does make a big difference in terms of seeing surface sculpturing versus glare is to take, you can use tissue paper or you can use lens cleaner, because often everyone who has a microscope should have lens cleaning paper, and you just rubber band it over the light. Really makes a difference. It's a little bit darker, but you can adjust for that. Really makes a difference in terms of clarity of the surface sculpturing and pitting. And you have to just arrange the lighting a little bit better so that it's much closer to the specimen. Light falls off as some kind of square of the distance. So anyway, here we go. Clypeus throughout here, but the yellow on atramontensis is restricted only to the lower portion, maybe 3/4. I think I was telling you, then got distracted. That is a deerberry specialist. So, and there may be one other species. The scientific name I forget, but I think Mike Arduzer says it's farkleberry, which seems like a made-up name, but it is not apparently. So, the species for deerberry is Vaccinium staminium, can be pretty common. There's also a couple other bees. Melita eichhortii is thought to be a specialist on that species too. It's a little murky. These are all very uncommonly collected, but I can tell you that the only places we have found this Panurginus atramontensis, which is only in a few cases, have all been on deerberry and then nesting nearby. They also have a neat little nest parasite that is Nomata. Forget what is the parva, the smallest of the, supposedly the smallest of the Nomata. Oof, wait until we get into Nomata. Okay, so there's the face that really locks in that particular species. And so rather than looking at a whole lot of other things, I should go to the correct guide here. We will restart the guide, crossing our fingers that it works. Let's look at the other two males. So we have polytrichus, the other two males in the east, polytrichus and potentilla. So polytrichus is larger, occurs more to the south. It really doesn't occur in Maryland. One record on the eastern shore. And okay, guide, we really need you to restart. There we go. And then potentilla, we're not sure what polytrichus is using. Could be a specialist. Also, potentilla does seem to be a specialist on potentilla, potentially. I guess what would the it's common in weedy lawns, and that's where we found this in different places. The potentilla, I can't recall the species name or the common name of it, but it occurs often in poor soils and big mats, and often with openings with no vegetation. So a place to always look for bees in general is sort of a crappy lawn area where people are mowing it but not tending it, and there's some sort of patch of bare clay soil often, but sometimes sand, clear soil that is surrounded by potentilla plants. And there are just a ton of things that often end up nesting in those bare muddy patches. Okay,
Cinquefoils.
cinquefoil, right. I think it's common cinquefoil is one. And now Discover Life has decided to have a hiccup. So obviously in the males, the alternative is that they're both entirely yellow. We don't need to really see that. But you have confronted them by a problem of having two species, Polytrichus and potentilla, that have to be separated, both with yellow clipiuses. And so what we're going to look at, I'm refreshing this. There is some pictures that can be looked at here, but we're looking at two features. One, larger Polytrichus, smaller is potentilla. That's in comparison. So if you have them side by side or you have a collection to compare, it will be really clear. If you don't, then you're really going to end up looking at the antenna. So we're going to look at flagellar segment 1, and it's clearly longer in Polytrichus, longer than flagellar segment 2, and in potentilla, which in our area and to the north is more common, and that's flagellar segment 1, shorter than or about equal to segment 2. So let's pull up the more common species. Again, up north here, I'm sure I have a male, and take a look at the antenna. All right, there we go. And we will get our configuration. Oh, that looks nice. All right, so you'll be able to see now also the clipius being all yellow. Not something that needs a whole lot of explanation. And I'm going to put this on full screen, which I did not do last time. There we go. All right. There is the mysteriously characteristic head shape of potentilla, or of Panurginus. And
So
here's the
can you
clipius.
describe this head shape a little bit more? Because I know I've made the mistake between, like when I'm quickly sorting these, between this and like Andrena males.
Yeah. So this is a problem because I will just say, well, it looks like one. And it's potentially that the eyes are not as long as males. I don't really know. I can't tell you why. The clipius is apparently looks like it may be projecting further out. So, gosh, I don't know. The antenna here compared to an Andrena antenna, but not all of them, because some have relatively short antennae. This is not very long. Most of these segments are close to 1-to-1. And most of the male antennae of Andrena would be quite a bit longer and project further. Often we would measure to, well, if this were bent backwards, where in relationship to the tegula would it lie? These probably may not even make it to the tegula or just make it, and most Andrena would extend beyond. But again, like I'm saying, there's so much diversity in Andrena, you don't see that. But I think I'm looking at this as short eyes. I could be totally wrong. And round head and relatively wide and projecting clipius. But the bottom line is, to me, it just looks like one. All right, we're at high power, so this is a very small specimen. So did that help Claire at all?
I took the notes and we'll see when I have one in front of me.
All right. Yeah. They're,
Thanks.
in terms of captures, are relatively uncommon. It seems like they mostly have to be netted rather than falling into bowl traps, like our small halictid friends do. So here is segment 1. This is a male. This is the pedicel. Here is F1, and here is F2. So let's go back to the guide and see what we says. This undoubtedly came from Mitchell. And so polytrichus, we're in potentilla. So flagellar segment 1 shorter than or at most equal to flagellar segment 2. Now, that doesn't look right to me. So this look, here's 2, right? And it looks shorter than segment 1. Let's look at the other side. There may be an angle thing going on here. Now, on this one, well, again, there's segment 1 and 2 look shorter to me. So if someone wants to look up Mitchell, have I somehow reversed this? Seems like I've had to use these guides myself. But that certainly doesn't look, it's almost certainly the species.
The guide also says, or at most equal, and I could
Right.
see that being equal.
I don't know. I mean, take a look here. This distance, we could actually measure it versus whatever the longest distance still to me is F1 is longer than F2. We'll go to the other side here and take a look. Bring it down, angle it slightly differently.
I think it's something we could convince ourselves of.
Hmm. So
the pictures, the diagrams have loaded on, like I have Discover Life up as well, and it seems to have loaded now. If you wanted to share those, it looks like the diagram for the polytrichus is much more clearly.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, we'll see if I can get it up. So this is maybe less ambiguous. Hopefully I have a male of polytrichus. But if let's see if we can flip back to the guide. I believe this is the only thing that Mitchell uses to separate them, but size clearly does. So cross your fingers. Oh, look. Okay. So when we look at that, so potentilla, we have antenna, which of course is a drawing. I guess that does look like it is, but it looks like even on this one, it looks like flagellar segment 1 isn't shorter. Maybe it's about the same. I don't know. I would like to go back to Mitchell. Gene, if you go back to Mitchell and see if the couplet for those 2 is somehow reversed. But let's also now, who said identifying bees were so clear cut? So let's go back and we'll look at polytrichus here and remove this specimen from the deck. I'll put them both together at the end because they are very different in size. And I wonder if I do have a male of that species. I have females. And I do not. I do not have any males. I'm going to put 2 females, and we'll talk female here in a minute, together. So you can see the significant size difference going on here. This again just brings up, as we have mentioned all the time, the usefulness of having access to collections rather than simply struggling with keys and not a lot of experience with the species. Okay, we're going to run this up a little bit. And we've got a lot of reflection from the tags that are on there, like far too much. So let's run the light down to there. It's a little bit better. And we'll just get it in the ballpark. Run that up a little bit more so we can see these two species side by side. Okay, so obviously they're at the same scale, and I'm going to run them further down even. So there's polytrichus females, and here's the potentillae female. So really different in size, and the males would be reflective the same. Sadly, I do not have a male polytrichus. Let's take a look now at the females, which is more of a struggle, I think, for a lot of people. Helpful to know where and when things were caught, though, as we talked about, at least two of them having a very clear association with plants. So if we go back to the guide and we look at this, and we can look at the distributions, but the distributions are also helpful. They don't occur in all the parts of the East. If we look at females, now we're looking at head dimensions. This is between eyes greater than length of face, less than or equal to length of face. So not a huge difference, but you can see that that may be one of weight of evidence in terms of comparing them. So if we look at only one, so you can see the green numbers tell you how many have been scored for this. So one has the distance, the wide head. And if we're looking at females, we've eliminated all the females except for polytrichus. So we can pop that species up. Why not do that now? And
so I also want you to address, we've had conversations in the past about where to measure for what things when we're talking about stuff like this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We do have the explain link there, but maybe you could say it out loud with words.
Yeah. So where people measure, when they talk about wider than or distances or head length, all those things are a bit, and there was, I think, a great discussion on bee monitoring listserv. If people are not on that, you can email me and we can put you on. So the trick is that you can measure in different places. You can have different angles. So let's explode this one. So this is the one that we're going to look at here in line. So when they're talking about distance, so in this case, they're not talking about distance to the outside of the eyes, which would be theoretically the head, but they're actually talking about the distance between the inner edges of the eyes. And then when you look, so this also assumes that you are looking at right angles to the general plane, which is generally flat, of the bee head. So in doing that, that seems like a pretty straightforward measurement. The one that's a little bit trickier is the one that's the vertical element. So the problem usually isn't the edge of the rim, because this is a sharp rim, right? So it's pretty clear it's going to be right there. The problem is the back of the head, because the back of the head, depending on the species, is gradually curves. And if you angle the head away from directly right angles, it's going to look a little longer or a little shorter. You have also, when things are very close in terms of length versus width, you also get just measurement error. Like, okay, most people don't have a measuring reticule that would measure these two items, but you can see here, these are not super different, right? So what it comes down to is, for most people, is they're going to look at it and go like, that looks like a wide head, or no, it doesn't look like a wide head. And you can't really trust that sort of feeling, because this is pretty close to equal in some ways. In nature, almost nothing is exactly equal, right? You would have to have exact to the gnat's eyelash, which is an actual measurement, of the two measurements that you'd make to be equal. So it's always a little bit more or a little bit less. And when you say about equal, well, that's kind of fuzzy talk. So, but when you look at this, this could be about equal, or it could be clearly shorter. So thus, this is not the greatest, and you should be aware that what people are saying is like, if I have a whole bunch of Panurginus females all looking at me, I can sort through them and say, oh, these are the wider heads and put them over in one pile from the ones that have narrower heads. And you're just doing a visual sorting, which is fine. But when you have one specimen and you want to do something like this, this is a dangerous situation because it could be interpreted also as roughly equal. And in other circumstances, in other species groups, think Bombus, that may actually be the case. So let's take a look at our mystery specimen. I think I've got it on deck. It's not a mystery specimen, it is polytrichus. And then we're going to go to also a little bit of an interpretation, which is going to be the area at the rim of the clypeus. So it's out of focus, so let's change this. And we also moved to a situation that does not have a white background, so we don't have to have the background be back. Okay, so you can see here, this is an inappropriate place. Given that I have this on a computer screen, I can measure this, right? So I can measure rim of the clypeus to the back of the head between these two, but it's at an angle, right? So we have something I will call the parallax problem, although officially it's maybe not parallax. So I just like to use big words sometimes to impress you. So here we're going to shift it to what I hope is more of a right angle shot to the plane of the viewer. So theoretically, this is shorter than this. I wonder if I know I have a measurement tool in here. I'm going to take 1 second and see if I can do this. All right, is that 1 point? And that's another point. Okay, 1.58, remember that? Now we're going to go from here to here, and that's 1.74. So what that tells me is this is shorter than the length, unless I measured the length from the wrong point, but I don't think I did. And this might be a smidge longer, but it's not backing up this issue here. So theoretically, this distance should be wider than this distance. But what we just measured was not on this picture, on this frame. And I think pointing out the great danger that that measurement has in terms of species ID information. But let's, in a comparative way, oh, we can just leave that on there. That might be interesting. I'm going to now, oh, but it'll be a different size. I'm going to bring in a head of atramontensis, which is in between the sizes in terms of absolute length of the two species. So here's a female. Now, in theory, this has a longer head. I'm going to put them both on this so we can switch between the two. I think the measurements that are on there are completely not going to work in this circumstance, although you can see from this that, see, when I change the magnification and everything, it changes I could line them up, but I don't think that's even correct in any kind of measurement way. So I wonder how I get rid of these. Oh, I get out of measuring space, perhaps. Maybe I go into acquire. I'm still in measurement space. Is it over now? I've gone into something that I probably shouldn't have. Claire, what do you know? How do I get out of, how can I stop this measurement thing?
I would say on that
How
screen.
about clear
Nope.
all objects? Up, got it.
There you go.
Sorry, what were you going to say? Sorry,
I was
before.
going to say you would go up to the arrow clicker and maybe click it and hit delete. No, to the right, to the right. The one that looks like your pointer in the annotations box.
All right. Oh, over
But
here.
you figured it out, so it's not
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this is atramontensis, and we are going to have a frozen screen, apparently. So now
I'd close that and maybe
that,
hit live again.
okay, yeah, probably
And
right.
also, whenever we're ready to transition, Jean did pull up the Mitchell information.
Okay, so I'm going to, gosh, how do I get out of this? Okay, that moves out of here. This, we just want to go away, but for some reason, I can't even move it. Darn these fancy programs. Can I click? I can click on it. Gosh. Now it's gone, but it seems like maybe if I just click my way over to the right. I don't know. Okay.
Maybe
Well,
you can drag and drop that folder back into where your SMZ panel is.
which folder? This one?
Yeah, the folder, like click on the annotations, what's highlighted in blue at the top.
This thing?
Yep, and try to drag it back into the program itself, like next to your SMZ portal or whatever that says, pad.
It doesn't seem to want to drag anywhere. Oh, maybe it's just
Yeah.
the tab?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. We just may lose this section. I can't seem to, Control A, delete, no,
Mm.
delete.
I think we need to call IT about yours since the lag thing is also still an
Yeah,
issue.
it's not so bad. I think we can see it over here. So I'm going to
Great.
stop fooling around here. I'm going to bump up the light. Wait a minute. Maybe this will work. No. Okay, I'm going to bump up the light. Oh my God. Can I do it this way? Here we go. Okay. 300. Doesn't look like it did much. And now I want to put it on full. What if I had to put it on full screen? Oh, that worked. Okay, so let's change going back to the head. So this should have a longer head, which it kind of appears to have there. Oh, it's locked. Oh, no wonder things didn't work. So oh, now it's at a different place. Live view, as per your suggestion. Good, okay, back in the game. Okay, so we're going back to here, full screen, and get our specimen in to the picture. There's the head, but we're going to shift it up and to the right to get it more at a right angle. I don't think I'm going to bother trying to, we've spent a bunch of time on this measurement thing. I don't trust myself without having everything go haywire. But if we look at this, one could see and suggest that this distance here to here is greater than here to here. But we also saw when we measured that actually on the other one, it also was too. So, but if I compared the two specimens, I think people would agree that this has a slightly longer field to it. Not useful in comparison, but in actual measurement, we seem to have some problems. Be nice for everyone to really have to spend some time sleuthing some of these characters. Okay, so now we get to a character here that separates all three of them, and it has to do with the clippius shape. So this is no longer appropriate up here. Click that off and hit search, and we're back up and we're just going to use the females. Okay.
Do you want to bop back to the males for a second and do the Mitchell thing, or do that when we've done?
Can we see Jean's screen, or how would you suggest?
Oh, I can just read to you. So Mitchell doesn't use the length of F1 and F2 to separate the species. But for Potentilla, it says scutum dull, punctures exceedingly minute and obscure. And for the other one, scutum to some degree shining with distinct though fine punctures. So that seems much easier than the
So flagellum. And that's for polytrichus versus Potentilla?
Yeah.
All right, let's look at that. And that's the males, right? Oh, I don't have a male. So, but when we look at the Potentilla male, we'll just bring that up on deck here. And how
Sam, that's for the species. It's not breaking it down to males or females.
Oh, you mean it's a single, so it should work across all the species.
According to this.
Okay.
Oh, that's neat.
And they didn't have anything. All right, so Potentilla was the shiny one. Do I get that right?
Backwards.
So it's the dull one, and I will have polytrichus on here, and we'll take a look at that. Now, so this should be, so is it just to separate out those two species? So how did you separate out the atramontensis?
Yeah, that separation will separate out Potentilla and the next two, which then becomes polytrichus and what is that? Montensis.
Okay, and then they have a separate, is that the clipial characters or is that some other feature?
Yeah, then it says for atramontensis, the upper part of the clipius is black, whereas for polytrichus, the clipius, except for the lateral angles, entirely yellow.
Great. What about the females, though? So it must have a bifurcation for males versus females, it sounds like.
Wait a minute. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was for males. Yeah, what I've just told you, that was all for males. For females, I got to go down a couplet.
Okay, let's stop for a second because I have a polytrichus female on deck, but you're saying that the scutum pitting and dullness is not a good character for that.
That was all for males.
Okay, I'm going to go back to looking at a male. Yeah, this might be why we dropped it from the guide, is that we did not like the shiny versus not shiny thing. So Potentilla is supposed to have what, dull?
Potentilla, yes, that is scutum dull.
All right, so male Potentilla on deck. So bring this up to full screen. So one can see here that there's reflection going on, even though we have tempered the lighting with various vellum paper and whatnot. But in between, so this reflecting light, so it's not completely flat, but you can see all this line. So often when people, Mitchell in particular, talks about dull, he is often just reflecting on the notion that there's a lot of microscopic inscribed lines across the surface. So these small things, I'm at my max magnification, should all be those small inscribed lines. And I'm just going to go through the focus here a little bit. And then we're going to swap to atramontensis, which should be basically just shiny. according to Mitchell, in the males. And then we'll go back to the face of the females. So let me get a good male here. This looks like one. So we're looking back at the scutum. Focus going. We're looking for shininess. Zip that up. And our resolution is not great here, but when we look at some of these areas in between, and I'll change the focus here a couple times, is I'm not seeing any of a set of intervening small microscopic lines like we saw in the others. So I guess we'll call that good, and maybe we should add that back into the guide for the males, although, and that would be good for, we don't need it for this species because it has the great clipial character, but we could add it for the other species, polytrichus, in addition to what appears to be difficult to discern distances on the antennal segments. Too bad Mike's not here. We can get his take on this. I'm not sure where I got that antennal segment stuff from. Some other revision. Yep. So we're going to go up to max, and we're just looking for any kind of shagreening, and I don't see anything. So I guess we'll call that good. We can look at it more under the microscope too. Okay, gonna stop. Now, while I'm doing this, setting up these next ones, Gene, is the females has to do with the angles on the clipius and things like that, like we mentioned in the Discover Life guides. So that would be in this area here.
Yeah, Gene pulled up the Mitchell characters. So we have the face thing. Which one do you want me to read first?
Well, we're going into the females, right? So
yeah.
Well, why don't I go through what we have here and see if there's anything that's reflected in Mitchell that's different.
Sounds good.
So this, I think, maybe entirely has to do with looking at, well, it has antennal segments things here. Maybe that's part of what we did is we took antennal segments from this character and applied it to the males, maybe inappropriately. But let's look at Potentillae female antennal segments. So here, and head, antenna, flagellar segment 1 equal in size to pedicel. Okay, and then flagellar segment 9, way out there, less than or equal to width. And we look at polytrichus, which we have flagellar segment 1 clearly longer than pedicel, and 9 length about equal to width. Let's check those out. So let's go to polytrichus, unless I have something on deck, which I don't. And we'll take a look at some of these antennae first. Let me get a good shot of a specimen that has its antenna in a nice place. That looks good. So the first, so we're looking at polytrichus. I'm going over here, taking this down, looking for the specimen. And we're going to zoom way up, small. And we're looking to see whether F1 is greater than the pedicel.
I'm on the species account page, and it looks like in Mitchell, while we didn't put in a key, it says extending, or no, basal segment of flagellum only slightly shorter than segments 2 and 3 combined.
Say it one more time. I was adjusting.
In the species description, basal description of flagellum only slightly shorter than segments 2 and 3 combined.
Okay, so it's, and this is in polytrichus?
Accurate.
Okay. So we will come back to that in a second here. Let me just get this magnified and in focus and in the right plane to look at, oops, flagellar segments. Okay, so scape, pedicel, first flagellar segment slightly out of focus. So in the Discover Life Guide, this segment longer than pedicel. Check that box. Now in Mitchell, what does he say?
Basal segment of flagellum only slightly shorter than 2 and 3 combined.
Okay, so needs to focus here a little bit again. So here's the basal segment of flagellum. So this is all flagellum here. And that's the basal segment. That would be the distance. Again, we're not actually measuring anything. And here's 2 and 3 combined. And it is shorter, but it's, you know, my eye on this would be that it would go to about there. Okay, so, and then on flagellar segment 9, so I'm not going to count them. What we're saying is look at the outer ones. They're about equal in width to length. Nine would be the next to last one, right? I'm doing my math in my head. Look at me. Get this dang thing in. There we go. So here is 10. So 10 plus 2 is 12 segments, and in females, this length versus width. So I would say the width is greater than the length. And in the guide, I think it says it's about equal. But that seems to be not that great. So here we're in polytrichus, which it definitely is because it's so much larger. Flagellar segment 9, length about equal to width. So I would say not accurate according to that picture. Let's look at potentilla. We're going to get a female.
And I know you said you had to log off exactly at 2, and this is your 4-minute warning.
Okay, good. And who knew there would be so much to talk about here? So let's grab this one. And obviously we need to revisit this guide and get some better clarity. Maybe that'll be Mike's next guide that he puts out. All right, this might be doable and usable. I think I want to shift this a tiny bit that way just to get a proper view of the species here, antenna. So we're looking at the antenna on the right. So I believe in terms of such a smaller thing. So the pedicel is about equal to the F1. Was that right in this one? Potentilla, head antennal flagellus segment 1 equal in size to pedicel. Okay. Again, is anything really equal? Hard to say exactly, but roughly we are in that ballpark. And then when we look at segment 9, the next to the last flagellar segment here, you know, definitely we have the situation where the width is much greater than the length. But we saw on the other one that, well, you know, that's not necessarily a whole lot different than what we have in polytrichus, because it seemed to be that the width was greater than the length too. So atramontensis, we have flagellar segment 1 clearly longer than the pedicel, and antennal flagellar segment 9 clearly greater. So this one says less than or equal, or polytrichus length about equal. Let's see if we can get flagellar segment 9 in atramontensis to be clearly greater. Okay, potentilla, go to bed there. Atramontensis female, a good antenna one. This looks good, has full of what are probably vaccinium pollen. All right. Take it down. Find our specimen back here. This is in between in size. We can see 9 here pretty well in that antennal segment. Let's run it up. Get it in focus. All right, well, I think this one actually is clear. So the length is greater than the width on that. What does it say about F1? So we're going to bring that in. So in this particular case, we have, just want to make sure I get this right. Yeah. So scape, pedicel, F1. F1, I would say, is longer. Here would be from here to here is longer than from here to here from the pedicel. Was that what it said? Flagellar segment 1 clearly longer than pedicel. Okay, we have agreement there. The next set of characters, maybe I have to split to do this workshop, but has to do with the shape of the clypeus. And we can just look at these pictures here and we'll try and pick up on that later. Pictures are not showing because Discover Life is unhappy apparently with those pictures, sadly. But if you can see from this smaller section of the screen, what we're looking at is the outline of the rim when looking directly, what would that view be called? Directly towards the clypeus from the labral point of view. So in atramontensis, it's greatly bowed, where you have almost a 90-degree angle on that. And here we have something more like, I think we call it maybe an arrow thing. These are all pretty, so the head shape, sides of the clypeus not obviously bent down, okay, from above. Clypeus rim shaped like an unflexed bow, and clypeus rim U-shaped when viewed on. So bow versus U-shaped, and this one is also U-shaped. So these combinations can be helpful, but again, when you get into these like degrees of shapiness, so whether polytrichus looks like that or not, I think we'll have to wait for a view. Maybe Mike will be on and can give us some more insight into some of this trickiness between these groups. And we have overall size that's super helpful here in this particular case, particularly between the polytrichus potentilla angle of it. So I think I'm going to stop because I do have to make it. Is there any questions, or have I just confused everybody?
I would probably say the latter. We do have some stuff from Jean
Okay.
about the females. I think we should start on this next time.
Okay.
And maybe this week I'll try to take photos of those clippii that we could use.
Okay. I like that. And it's the kind of thing that we could throw that back out to the bee monitoring listserv to get some more viewpoints. But at least Mike, Mike really, he's like the wizard at these kinds of things. So let's see what he has to say too.
Cool. Yeah. All right, let's all drop and have a great week.
All right. Thank you, Claire, for hosting all this.
See you later.
Okay. Bye now.